Does anyone have an answer for a gut-punched, beat down, and defeated beekeeper? Let's help this guy out. I'm David Burns. I got a comment today, and boy, it really struck a chord with me because it's a new beekeeper that has a serious problem. And he reached out to our community on our comment section of my beekeeping channel. And I thought the best way to reach out and I wanted to make a video and say, this is what I think's going on. This is what I think happened. Does anyone have an answer for a beat down, gut punched, and defeated new beekeeper? I just started this year with a nuke and it was doing great. It grew to fill 2 deep boxes in a super that was about 95% full of capped honey. It was late, but I put on another super just to see what would happen. There was little capped honey, but the frames were almost completely drawn out. They were doing good when I inspected them a couple of weeks ago, and I was very pleased. I was out of town last week, and when I got home, I checked it, and I saw yellow jackets were flying in and out. So I figured I better inspect it, and when I opened it up, all the honeybees were gone. Does anyone have any suggestions as to why they would have left? Wow, that's a very good question. Can you imagine being in this scenario where you have a successful hive and it's doing really well and it has grown, you've bought it from a nucleus and it's doing well, filled up 2 deeps, even put some honey in that deep, the top deep probably, and then in that top honey super, they even drew comb out, but they didn't have a chance to actually put honey in it. That's not too unusual for a brand new first year hive. So here's what I think is going on, and there's not much information here. So when I or you, or if you're a beekeeper that helps other people, you know sometimes people will ask questions like this, and you're finding yourself wondering, I have a lot of questions. So there's no way to really answer this because there's so much information that is missing. What is the first bit of information that all of us want to know about? Number one, mite control. You know, how did you handle your mites all year long? What did you use? What treatment did you use? What IPM method, integrated pest management method, did you use to control your mites? Because sometimes mites can become such an infestation and they spread viruses, and this could have been what caused the hive to dwindle down. The second thing that doesn't really seem to me to be clear is, how did your queen do? Did she lay a lot of brood? Is she a good laying queen? I see references to boxes being filled up, comb being drawn out, but for a hive to be successful, you got to have a lot of brood. You got to have a good laying queen. That's all there is to it. So those 2 things come to mind. Third thing is, what about swarm control? It sounds like they grew pretty well. And is it possible that they grew so well that half of them may have swarmed, cutting down on your population and caused them to dwindle down? And like what happened to me this year, I don't think that one of my hives did very well requeening themselves after they swarmed. So the population dwindled, it looks like to me, while you were gone. So something happened to the hive, and I don't think it happened overnight. I don't think it was just wonderful and then all at once is bad. Although that can happen, a colony can abscond sometimes. But I think in this case, there was an issue. It had to do with a pathogen, probably a virus, or maybe it had to do with your queen failing and they didn't have the ability or a chance to replace her properly. And that does happen. And so the population continued to get worse and worse until they essentially were gone. And at that point, that was just free game for all of their insects, in your case, these yellow jackets, to go in there and rob out all of this honey. So I could be totally wrong because of the lack of information that's in this comment, but I kind of feel that that's what I'm seeing here that has gone on in this hive. So it brings to mind several things. Number one, it's important that we keep good records of what we're doing and seeing in our hives all year long, starting from day one. Because we can go back to our records and say, I had good laying queen on March the 30th. I had a good laying queen on April the 30th. We can just go down the calendar and say I had a lot of eggs on June the 1st, you know, a lot of kept over brood. Make notes in your diary or your journal about this hive. And then you'll know kind of like what happened. You have to keep count of the mites and how much they're expanding. So every 30 days, you should really do a mite test. And that would be with an alcohol wash, and you track it. You say, okay, first week in April, I only had 2 mites out of 300 bees, so I'm doing pretty good. And you just track to see what's trending. Are they getting worse? And you know how your mites are doing. But the trick to beekeeping, if there's a trick to it, it's hard work, it's labor intense, there's no shortcuts, there's no way around it except for all of us to dig our heels in and really get in that hive. I often say cowboy up. Muscle up, cowboy up, get in there. Every 2 weeks you're looking for eggs, make sure your queen's okay. But then one of those inspections is going to be more thorough, where you're looking at your brood, you're looking at resources, you're evaluating the population of the colony, seeing if it's really populated well. Do an inspection twice a month. Once, real quick, look for eggs, she's in there, don't have to find her. The next inspection in 2 weeks, more thorough, a 10 or 15-minute inspection. What's my brood like? And how are my resources looking? What's the population of my hive? Overall, how is my colony doing? You're kind of doing a more thorough inspection. I think in this case, you were only out of town a couple of weeks. Something happened. Let me just give another possibility. Sometimes bees do actually abscond. They leave. Nobody really knows why. A colony will just up and abandon a box, a hive, but they'll be gone. I remember one year I was asked to remove a colony that was in the wall of a house. I went with my construction partner, we evaluated it. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow. I think it was maybe the next day or in a couple of days. A very large colony. I mean, 8-foot long combs, and you know how it goes if you've ever done that work. It's just magnificent on how large these colonies get in between the walls, the 2x4 walls in a house. So we went back just a few days later, gone, nothing. The honey was still there. They just absconded. That means everybody left. Swarming is when half of the colony leaves with the old queen, they raise a new queen. Absconding, everybody leaves. It's just an empty box. So I'm sorry that happened to you. I think it's really unfortunate. It's really frustrating. And this is another reason why I always say if you're going to start beekeeping, start with 2 hives. If this happens to one of your hives, you're still a beekeeper. But if you have 1 hive and this happens, you're not a beekeeper anymore. Remember that saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So if you're thinking about starting beekeeping next year, just remember, you might think about scraping enough money together to start with 2 hives for reasons like this. And if you're thinking about starting next year, got a great video for you, how to start beekeeping. It has, I think, over almost 2 million views on it. Take a look. I'll see you guys over here.